right. Excellent connection. Make sure we're streaming properly. I think we are. We'll start with our prayer. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryan Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. Good. Welcome back to our ongoing satsangs. For our online students, let me say that we've shifted our local schedule so that in every summer I love to have satsang in the evening. We sit outside in the garden, and it is just lovely. So many of our satsang students are now coming at 6 p.m. There'll be few of them are here. Yeah, you want to stay away from the camera? There you go. Thank you. Okay, you're fine. So we'll continue then with our. The advantage of this arrangement is it'll allow me to be more focused on those of you sending your questions by email. We'll see how it goes. All right, and as I said, you send your questions to me. It's helpful if you say satsang question in the subject line. Then Google does me a favor and puts it in the right place. Otherwise, I have to go hunting around for all of that. Okay, let us begin. First is from Krishna, who lives in Boston, and he references the fact that I frequently say that the purpose of Advaita Vedanta is the removal of suffering. So Krishna understands that clearly, which means Vedanta is not a philosophy. How many people say Vedanta philosophy? It's not philosophy is not for the sake of solving the problem of suffering. Vedanta is a pursuit of knowledge. This is not a pursuit of knowledge. This is an attempt to solve the problem of human suffering. So Krishna's question here is, how does one overcome the real pain that comes with physical suffering, like throat cancer, referring perhaps to Sri Ramana Maharshi, who died of throat cancer? How does one invoke principles of Advaita when the pain is real? And I think to answer Krishna's question, we have to understand the real pain that comes with physical suffering. We need to start by defining pain and suffering more clearly. We define pain as a physical sensation, that which arises in your body, any part of your body, we call that pain. Suffering, and different people have different definitions. In Advaita Vedanta, our definition of suffering is this: how you respond to pain. And this is an important distinction because it is possible to have pain without suffering. For example, if your pain is a headache, some people go on complaining, oh, my headache is so bad, oh, this and that and the other thing. That's not necessary. I'm smiling at myself. When I get a headache, I rate it on a scale of 1 to 10. That's a really good headache. It's really pounding. But why should I let it bother me? Why should I obsess on that pain? If there's something I can do about it, if I can take some pain medications, I do. Whatever can be done to alleviate pain should be done. But the problem is when we obsess on our pain. All of our attention goes towards that pain. How can we enjoy our lives when all of our attention is focused on pain? It is possible to experience pain without suffering. Not easy to get there, and especially there are people who suffer from chronic pain, and that's got to be extremely difficult to deal with. A headache that comes and goes, I think, is very easy to deal with, but someone who suffers from unremitting chronic pain, it's a much more challenging situation. But these teachings of Advaita Vedanta are powerful enough to help you be sufficiently detached from your body and mind so that you become the observer of the pain, a detached observer of the pain, an unaffected, detached observer of the pain. These teachings are powerful enough to do that. A question from Ayush, who lives in India. If a person maintains some awareness in deep sleep, will it be called sushupti or turiya? First of all, awareness is not called sushupti or turiya. Awareness is just consciousness, unchanging consciousness. Unchanging consciousness has no states. This is a very common confusion. Students of Vedanta early on see this analysis of deep sleep, dream state, and waking state. These are three states. Waking, dream, and deep sleep are three states, but they're three states of your mind. They're not states of consciousness. Consciousness is an unchanging fundamental reality. As an unchanging fundamental reality, consciousness is present when your mind is awake. As an unchanging fundamental reality, consciousness is present in your dreams in the same way. And as an unchanging fundamental reality, consciousness is present when you're in deep sleep, sushupti. How could it not be? It's an unchanging reality. So consciousness is the unchanging reality that remains equally present in waking, dream, and deep sleep, these three states of mind. Turiya is not a state of mind, it's a technical term used to describe one that is different from the three. Turiya means fourth. So in addition to these three states of mind, there is one consciousness. That one consciousness is called the fourth, with regard to the three states of mind. But turiya is not a fourth state of consciousness for the reasons I just said. Consciousness has no states. Turiya is a technical name we give to unchanging consciousness. Good. Next question is from Anton, who lives in Israel. Good. Yeah, and he is rather involved. I'll go to the essence of the question. If Brahman is Nirguna, so Nirguna Brahman, then what is and I'm going to paraphrase all of this. What is the relationship between Nirguna Brahman and Maya? This is a very, by the way, as soon as you start talking about Maya, you're in for it. It is one of the most complex topics in Advaita Vedanta. Not an easy topic at all to understand. We could spend the rest of our session on this question. Let me try to answer, Anton, very, very briefly. What is the relationship between Brahman, which is non-dual and free from gunas? So look at the problem. If Maya is a second thing, if there's Brahman plus Maya, if Maya is a separate thing as real as Brahman, what happens to non-duality? We have one Brahman plus one Maya. If my math is correct, that adds up to 2. So non-duality is out the window. But here's the more subtle thing, and I think this is what Anton is hinting at, and that is, if Maya cannot be a separate thing from Brahman, then Maya must be an attribute of Brahman. That's a good question, or a good point. So if Maya can't be a second thing in addition to Brahman, that would destroy non-duality, then Maya must be an attribute of Brahman. Therefore, Brahman is not Nirguna. It has the attribute of Maya. And this is the complexity of Vedanta, and it comes from the failure to differentiate between levels of reality. We speak of an absolute level of reality called paramarthika satta. Then we come down a state to an empirical state of reality we call vyavaharika satta. So from the standpoint of paramarthika satta, the absolute reality, there is only Nirguna Brahman. There is no such thing as Maya. From the standpoint of non-dual Brahman, Maya does not exist. From the standpoint of empirical reality, Maya most certainly exists. But let me try to illustrate that. From the standpoint, let me just turn this off. Don't do that. Okay. From the standpoint of clay, there is no pot. This is it. Is potness a quality of clay? Well, let's go through the steps. Is there one in my hand? Is there one pot and one clay? No, we won't say that. So this is how we reject duality. It's not one pot and one clay. There is one thing and two perspectives. The higher perspective of clay and the empirical perspective of pot. Then, Anton's question, could we say then that pot is a quality of clay? That's what Anton suggests, and in Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta, we reject that completely. From the standpoint of clay, there's only clay. Nothing but clay. There's no pot to even consider. So to answer Anton's question, we need to be very careful about distinguishing these two orders of reality, paramarthika satta, vyavaharika satta, and it is a very common problem for students of Advaita to mix these two up. And as soon as you mix these two up, confusion gets more confusing. Oh, I have to share with you a joke. This is, by the way, this is very complex. So many teachers of Vedanta are themselves confused about this. My guru made an interesting statement combining Sanskrit and English. Actually, about confused. He says, when a teacher is confused, in Sanskrit, swayam, confused. When the teacher is confused, paran confusayati. He turns confused into a causal verb. When the teacher himself or herself is confused, paran confusayati. Others are made confused by that problem, and it happens a lot. Okay, next question from Maya, who lives in Singapore. Maya asks, in our anniversary, I gave a talk on harmful and dharmic arguments, and I gave 3 ways to argue dharmically. Those three steps of arguing dharmically. The 3 steps of a dharmic argument is step 1, listen. So many people don't listen in an argument. And listen not just to the intellectual argument they're making, listen and pay attention to their emotions. Their emotions are probably as important or more important than the argument they're making. And what happens in most arguments is the emotional part is ignored. And the whole focus is on the content of the argument, the logical, verbal content. So you pay attention only to the verbal part, you ignore the emotional part. It's no surprise that most arguments don't have a helpful outcome, and this is one of the reasons. So step 1, listen. And listen, as I said, not only to the words, but pay attention to the emotions involved. Step 2 is respond. And respond in a helpful way. Respond means if your emotions are worked up and you start shouting, it's all over. So respond calmly, rationally, and respond thoroughly to both the verbal part of the argument and to the emotional part of the argument. And the third part is, if that doesn't solve the problem, whatever you're arguing about, if the problem remains, stop. That's a third step of the argument. If you've responded appropriately and the person doesn't get it, the point here is continuing to argue usually does more harm than good. Is it not true? So step 3 is stop. I've just summarized that whole talk. If you want it in much more detail, it's quite a nice talk, I think. So you go to my YouTube channel and find the, I think it was titled Harmful and Dharmic Arguments, or something like that. It was just a week ago, posted on our website. So now we're ready for Maya's question. She made reference to those 3 tips. And then she says, but having done so, then what to do when the other person keeps giving excuses and they don't admit their mistake? What is the dharmic thing to do to settle the wrong? Is it your responsibility to settle the wrong? Here's allow me to say the obvious. You cannot change what another person thinks, feels, or believes. Full stop. You can't do it. They can do it. And what you say or do might help them change. But they have to change. You can't change. You can't change them. So if you have really gone through these 3 steps of listening with an open mind and understanding where they're coming from an emotional standpoint, if you've done the second step of presenting your view in the most clear, rational, and complete way possible, then if they still don't get it, what did I say was step 3? That's it. What do you say? Bas ho gaya. That's enough. It's over. And honestly, knowing when to stop an argument is an important skill that most people seem to lack. Think about it. Okay, next question from Vishwajit, who lives in Bangalore. Vishwajit says, we often talk about the purpose of Vedanta to eliminate suffering, as we just discussed in an earlier question. And we understand that suffering is due to attachment to body and mind. Instead of attachment, I would say identification with body and mind. This is me. So attachment has a little different meaning. Identification with body and mind. Ultimately, suffering is in the mind, isn't it? Suffering takes place in the mind. Consciousness doesn't suffer. Suffering takes place in the mind. With an attitude of healthy detachment, we reduce and eliminate suffering, correct? So who is really suffering? Whoever is asking this question. It's really that simple. The one who's asking the question is the one who suffers. But it's a little bit more complex than that, because who is asking this question? Does consciousness ask questions? Consciousness has no mouth. Does the mind ask questions? Mind is just a subtle thing. Without consciousness, the mind wouldn't even exist. Does the body, does the mouth talk on its own? We hope not. So So then who suffers is a composite being. Body, mind, consciousness. We call jiva. Who suffers is not the mind. Who suffers is not consciousness. Who suffers is jiva, a composite of body, mind, senses, body, etc. Okay. Then, next question from Amit, who lives in India. Amit asks, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, Ganesha, etc. are various deities. Oh, he's asking a question. Are Brahma, Vishnu, Ganesha, etc. are these various deities part of Ishvara? And does Brahma actually create the universe? Or are all these just Puranic stories? Or do these deities matter in Advaita Vedanta? So, the origin of all these stories, Brahmaji creating the universe, Ganesha, what a story. Shiva chopping off, what a story. Shiva chops off the head of his son. Anyway, you know all these stories better than me. We won't get into the stories. Definitely, these portrayals of these deities are all, not all, but mostly come from Puranas, Puranic stories. Are they part of Ishvara? We would say they are representations of Ishvara. They're not parts of Ishvara. It's not that Ishvara has one part Brahman, one part Vishnu, one part Shiva. Ishvara is the god of the cosmos. Ishvara is creator, sustainer, destroyer, karma paladatta, intelligence of the universe, and so much more. Ishvara is everything, god of the cosmos. That Ishvara can be represented in stories in many ways, as Brahma, Vishnu, Ganesha, and so forth. So you could say that these are symbolic representations of Ishvara given in the context of certain stories, certain situations. And as symbolic representations of Ishvara, they're meant to two things. One, they're meant to teach us certain religious and spiritual principles. They're also meant to help us develop devotion. Because Amit asks, do these deities matter in Advaita Vedanta? In an indirect manner, absolutely. An indirect manner means in Advaita Vedanta, without some kind of devotional practice, you're not likely to make lots of practice. Devotion is not the main focus at all, agreed. But the complete absence of any kind of devotional feelings or devotional practice, that complete absence will be an obstacle. So the representation of Ishvara as all of these deities, we'll say, is useful in helping us develop some kind of devotional practice, which is, as I said, it's not the central point of Advaita Vedanta, but I think it's fair to say that the complete absence of devotional feelings will at some point become an obstacle in your pursuit through the teachings of Vedanta. All right, that's Amit's question. Next is Roshan. Roshan lives in New York. North York. North York, Ontario, Canada. Okay, New York is different than North York. All right. So Roshan asks, how to take competition in a spiritual way, a non-materialistic way? That's an interesting question, because generally people take competition really, really seriously. In the workplace, and not all workplaces, but in many workplaces, you know how competition to get ahead in your business and your corporation, whatever, you know that drive. I find it amusing, competition in the form of sports. I'm just amazed. These professional sports people playing football, soccer, playing basketball, playing tennis. How much, the top-ranked people in their profession, how much are they paid? Millions and millions of dollars a year. I find that's just amazing. Yeah. And it confuses me a little bit. And the answer, of course, is it's all very commercial. And that is, these sports generate lots of income by selling advertising when their programs are on television. So it makes sense from a business point of view. But you can imagine, if getting included in a certain team, in a certain sport, meant that you got a $10 million a year contract, which is not unusual. You can imagine the competition to get into the team and to get that contract. So lots of competition. I guess I'm putting this down as a groundwork by saying competition is fueled by desire, like everything else in life. From a Vedantic analysis of competition, it's just one more expression of desire. Raga and dvesha. Raga being compelled to chase after what you want. This is basic human thinking, human orientation. So a common expression of desire. If Roshan asks, what would be a spiritual way to compete? It would be to compete without desire. What would that be like? To compete without desire. Give a favorite example of mine. When I was in college, this is back in the 1970s, a little while ago, on Friday evenings, we would gather, students, we would gather for a poker game. And we would play a lot of poker is a game where you bet, and we were only playing for nickels and dimes. So, but actually the reason we came to those poker games is we would drink a lot of beer. And I did so. In those days, I drank lots of beer. So we'd get together on Friday night, play a lot of poker. I would drink a lot of beer. We'd play for nickels and dimes. And at the end of the evening, you win $2, you lose $2, nothing much. It was so much fun. And it was so much fun, partially because we drank a lot of beer, but partially because it was a competition not driven by desire. Because if you win, you only win $1 or $2, big deal. If you lose, you lose it. So it's a competition not driven by desire is more fun because usually there's fear of losing, right? And fear of losing really takes the joy out of competition. So, there's good. By the way, there's a second part of the story. Let me just include it because it makes a good point. This poker game went on for several years. And in that span of time, the stakes kept creeping up. So instead of playing for nickels and dimes, there were quarters and dollar bills, then $5 bills, then $20 bills. And we were, at least I was a poor student. I didn't have that much money. I remember playing games where I didn't enjoy it. I drank beer, and I still didn't enjoy because I was afraid of losing too much money. This is competition driven by desire. I needed money to buy gasoline for my car. Not very pragmatic kind of desire. When competition is driven by desire, absolutely that's worldly, it is non-spiritual, it's just another, as I said, another expression of desire. when competition is not driven by desire, that we can say is non-materialistic, spiritual competition. But where do we see that in the poker game example I gave, but I think rarely do we see that in other avenues of life. You can imagine a family is getting together and playing a board game. That's an excellent example. There are winners and losers, but it's fun, as a family. Okay, let's continue. Next question is from Arun. Arun also lives in Bangalore. In the last satsang, I mentioned something about Bhagavad Gita as it is, which is a well-known commentary on the Bhagavad Gita written by Srila Prabhupada, the founder of the Krishna consciousness movement, ISKCON. And Srila Prabhupada was very pious, very devoted, but very much a Vaishnava. And not just Vaishnava, part of a particular sect of Vaishnavism, tracing back to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, mostly called Gaudiya Vaishnavism. So when he wrote the Bhagavad Gita as it is, that word, that as it is just misleading. Sorry, and this is not meant as a criticism, but I can understand why he put as it is. As it is, according to Gaudiya Vaishnavism. Absolutely, it's as it is to all Gaudiya Vaishnavas. Now the problem though is, suppose, back to Arun's question, suppose a sadhaka were to look at this book and start comparing it to, for example, the translation with Shankara's commentary. Would he not get bewildered? Actually, it depends. If he was a Gaudiya Vaishnava, he would throw away Shankara's commentary. If he was an open-minded seeker, he'd absolutely get confused, because what the two would be teaching would be quite different, extremely different. Okay. So for that open-minded sadhaka, there would be apparent contradictory perspectives between Prabhupada's commentary and Shankara's commentary. For a sadhaka who wishes to have a complete intellectual understanding of the Bhagavad Gita, what would you recommend? I think Arun maybe used an unfortunate choice of words, intellectual understanding. Is the Bhagavad Gita intended for intellectual understanding? It is if you're a scholar. If you're a scholar, you want an intellectual understanding. And what should you do if you want a complete intellectual understanding of the Bhagavad Gita? I would say the best thing to do is learn Sanskrit and read it in the original. People, learning Sanskrit. They say, who can do that? This movie, Oppenheimer, is popular. Is that the name of the movie? What is the name? That's the name of it. I haven't seen it. About the creator of the atomic bomb. Oppenheimer was a physicist. He took the time to learn Sanskrit and read Bhagavad Gita in its original. So, I'm not saying it's easy. And Oppenheimer definitely was something of a genius. But if you are a scholar and you really want to get a complete intellectual understanding of Bhagavad Gita, there's no choice. Learn Sanskrit, study the original with no commentaries. Read the original. That's it. That's all you need to do. Now, and I said unfortunate choice of words, because Arun said for a sadhaka, a spiritual aspirant. I would suggest that a spiritual aspirant doesn't need or want a complete intellectual understanding. It's not an intellectual pursuit. A true sadhaka is one who wants to come out of this samsara, this life of worldly suffering, and eventually gain moksha, liberation. That's the orientation of a sadhaka, not intellectual understanding. So what should that sadhaka do? Depends. If that sadhaka were raised in a Gaudiya Vaishnava family, maybe Swami Prabhupada's book would be the best. But if that sadhaka were open-minded and had some inclination towards these teachings of Advaita Vedanta, what would I suggest for that sadhaka? Two very pragmatic suggestions. One is my guru created what he called a home study program on the Bhagavad Gita. Comes to about 2,000 pages. And if you read those 2,000 pages, you'll have much more than an intellectual understanding. You will get that understanding, but you'll get so much more through that kind of study. Another pragmatic example is my lectures on the Bhagavad Gita are available. Videos are available on YouTube. That would be a very, I think, very pragmatic way, and simple and hopefully enjoyable way to go into the Bhagavad Gita, not for intellectual understanding, but for spiritual growth. That distinction is clear. It's important. If you study the Bhagavad Gita for intellectual understanding, you're kind of going in the wrong direction. If you're studying the Bhagavad Gita for the sake of spiritual growth, that would be far better. Okay? That's Arun's question. Next, we have a lot of questions. I should apologize now. We won't finish all of these questions. If I fail to answer your question, I'm sorry. We'll do what we can here. This is a question from Jay, who lives in New York. Thoughts and decisions come from the brain, and the brain is a biological computer. Yeah, who would deny that? The brain is a biological computer. But doesn't this mean free will is impossible? Since all computers are deterministic or are deterministic in nature. He means deterministic, I think he's missing a word here, and not random in nature. Computers are deterministic if the software is deterministic. Software need not be deterministic. Software can take inputs from the world. The world looks pretty random to me. I don't see the world as being deterministic. Or from a purely software standpoint, software can include random number generators. So any software based on randomly numbered sequences is not going to be deterministic. So I think there's a wrong assumption Jay has made here. Computers need not function in a deterministic way. That means our brains need not function in a deterministic way. And the fact that our brains, I would agree with Jay, yes, our brains are biological computers, but they're not deterministic. We do have free will. Okay. Next question from Mickey, who lives in Australia. After death of the body, we assume that there's no more working mind. If someone recognizes Tattvamasi while living, and someone gets enlightened while living, upon death, that recognition won't continue. So it seems that Brahman needs a mind to appreciate itself as Brahman. You have to think about what Mickey's point here. In order for Brahman to say, I am Brahman, Brahman needs a mind. And when you die, there's no mind. So there's no, you get the point. This idea of needing to appreciate your nature as Brahman is problematic. An enlightened person doesn't continually say to himself or herself, I am Brahman, I am Brahman, I am Brahman. That's absurd. So that doesn't happen. when an enlightened person says, who am I really? Brahman. But when the enlightened person is chopping vegetables and talking on the phone at the same time, you can be sure that he's not thinking, I am Brahman, or the thumb is going to get chopped off along with the vegetables. Okay, simple enough. Here's a metaphor. Do you, see if you can, you'll get this metaphor. Do you need to look in the mirror to know who you are? No. The mind is like that mirror. When the mind says, I am Brahman, it's like looking in the mirror. But even when you're not looking in the mirror, you're still who you are. And for an enlightened person, even when they're not thinking, I am Brahman, they're still Brahman. You don't need to look in a mirror, so to speak. Next. This is from Payal, who lives in India. Question, is sakshi bhava reflected consciousness or pure consciousness? It would take me an hour to explain all of these terms. So for those of you who know what these terms mean, I'm going to give a very short answer, and that is pure consciousness is at the level of non-duality. There is only consciousness. There is nothing but consciousness. The moment you're talking about sakshi bhava, witness consciousness, the observer, there's an observer and observed, there's a witness and witnessed, there's duality. So duality then is definitely any duality is a product of reflected consciousness, not pure consciousness. Pure consciousness is non-dual. Reflected consciousness has duality. And if that didn't make any sense to others of you, don't worry about it. It depends on careful definition of these terms, and I don't think it's helpful in this satsang to spend a lot of time on that. Next question is from Robert. In the Mandukya Upanishad, there's an explanation of Om, a brilliant explanation in which the Om is grammatically deconstructed into A, U, Ma, and in that grammatical deconstruction, A symbolically represents the waking state, U symbolically represents the dream state, Ma symbolically represents the state of deep sleep. These are three states of the mind. And then the silence that follows Om represents what's called turiya, the fourth pure consciousness. The consciousness present in the waking, dream, and deep sleep states, that consciousness. So that's what's taught in the Mandukya Upanishad. He says that taking Om, and there's a problem here. Robert takes Om as the physical symbol. By the way, I'm making effort to draw it backwards for me. For me, it's backwards. For you, it's forward. So this is the So we got this one, then we've got this one, then we've got this one. All right, so you can visualize Om in your mind. And the Om described in the Mandukya Upanishad is not the physical symbol, it's a sound that's analyzed in the Mandukya Upanishad. But Robert focuses on this character, this figure. And he says that the diamond represents the fourth turiya, the diamond meaning, we call it technically Ardha Bindu. So you got this Chandra, this thing is called a Chandra, this is the Bindu, that dot. He calls it a diamond. It's a diamond when it's done with a calligraphy pen. It comes out as a diamond, otherwise it's just a dot. He says that the dot is the fourth, the upside down rainbow, so that's a tail coming down. The upside down rainbow represents Maya. And then my question is, the three states of consciousness represented 1, 2, And what is three? I don't know. The problem with this is there's no connection whatsoever between the three states of mind and the fourth, being pure consciousness, no connection whatsoever with that physical, with that depiction, that character of Om, the way we write it. And the way we write it is actually arbitrary. There are many different ways of writing it. What I've just shown you is just one way of writing it in Devanagari script. It can be written in other ways in Devanagari script. I like the Arya Samajis. They put the number 3 inside. They write O. That's O. What? I think this doesn't make any sense to anyone, but anyway. They'll write O and then a number 3 and then Ma. That's how they write it. O, the number 3, and then Ma, because O is 3 matras long instead of 2, as most long characters are. In Tibetan mantras also begin with Om, many of them, and in Tibetan script it's completely different. The point I'm making is the script is arbitrary. Om is a sound symbol. It's not a physical symbol. Which means to put Om on an altar, to put these people like these Om things, they put it on an altar. I'm not saying it's wrong, but symbolically it misses the point. Because Om is not a physical appearance of any particular. Om is a sound, and you can't really put a sound on the altar. Robert apparently encountered some teacher or teaching that made these connections. I would say that the connections are arbitrary. They're the product of whoever is a teacher. It's their own invention, their own thought. If it's helpful, fine, but it is definitely not true to the Mandukya Upanishad and the whole tradition going back to the ancient rishis. Man, these are really good questions. I'm enjoying this. I hope you are as well. What is the difference or relationship between prana, that which makes you alive, and consciousness? Now, that may seem obvious to some of you. In Western science, until about 300 years ago, 200 years ago, they thought that life was some kind of mystical force. They called it élan vital. This is Western science, European science in the 17th and 18th centuries. That there was some mysterious thing called life, élan vital, until they discovered that they could create organic compounds in a test tube. And that threw their theory out the window. And then the theory really went out the window in the early part of this century when they discovered the DNA molecule. So we know that what we understand as life is biology. Life is biology. In a way, I'm not sure if I should make that connection. Just as in the modern worldview is life is biology. But an early Western worldview, prior to the 18th century, is life is not biology. That was an ancient worldview. So too in ancient India, prana is not biology. Prana was not the same as a physical body. Prana was something different, unique. They called prana, literally means breath, but in a broader context means life force, and that means that which makes a physical body alive. The body dies, prana is gone. The body is alive, prana is present. So the worldview in ancient India was not unlike the worldview in the West up until the 18th century. Maybe there's some similarity between this concept of prana and the Western idea of élan vital vital force. They would translate that. What is the relationship between prana and consciousness? Obviously different. And this is where there is in the West, they might have confused that élan vital with the essence of a person, consciousness. But in ancient India, that mistake they didn't make. In ancient India, they didn't understand biology. Absolutely not. They did understand consciousness. So in 18th century Europe, they would have considered élan vital and consciousness to be one and the same. In ancient India, it was very clear that consciousness is not the same as prana. Prana enlivens the body. Consciousness does not enliven the body. How do we know that? Look at this, very easy to say this. Prana is inside the body. When the body dies, prana goes away. What about consciousness? When you die, what happens to consciousness? Well, we understand consciousness as a fundamental reality. As a fundamental reality, that consciousness is not somehow stuck inside your body. Prana is stuck inside. Or arguably, by the way, in some yoga texts, they speak of the fact that when you breathe, prana goes out here, and then it comes back. So some ancient yogis thought that prana also isn't stuck inside your body, but can leave your body to some extent. That's how they looked upon it. But what about consciousness? Consciousness as a fundamental reality can't be stuck inside your body. Consciousness, properly understood, is boundaryless, limitless, therefore all-pervasive. So if I ask the question, what happens to consciousness when you die? The proper answer is, some of you would say, kuch nahi. Nothing. Nothing at all happens to consciousness when you die, which means when you die, prana leaves, consciousness remains present in the body. You can't detect it, but consciousness is absolutely present in a dead body. This just gives evidence to what the ancient rishis understood. Consciousness does not enliven the body. Prana enlivens the body. Okay, one or two more questions, and we'll conclude here. Do animals have reincarnation? What happens when they die? Don't they have a subtle body? Any living thing has a subtle body. And why limit it to animals? What about insects? What about plants? I have no idea, but plants are living things. Presumably, plants have some rudimentary nervous system. You know, there's that fern. Many of you have seen a fern that if you rub the fern, the leaves contract. Wow, what a thing! So there must be something going on even in a plant. What to say of an insect or an animal? According to the doctrine of karma, all living beings have a subtle body. At the time of death, that subtle body leaves the physical body and travels on to take another body. One more question, then we'll conclude. Is Atma and Brahman the same? Yes. That's it. See you next time. I don't know, it takes a little more explanation. Is Atma and Brahman the same? If they are one and the same, then why do we use different names and create a difference? Can't we call Atma Brahman? So why do we use this complicated terminology? And it goes beyond Atma and Brahman. Vedanta is filled with these very precise terms that we use. He also makes reference to another term, Jivatma. Does Jivatma refer to soul or Atma? We have to define these words very, very carefully. But more than that, let me address the question in a different way, and this will be the last part of our satsang. To merely define all of these terms is obviously not the point of Advaita Vedanta. Do you become enlightened when you know what all these words mean? Absurd, right? Enlightenment, so when Brahman is when you know how to properly define Brahman, Atma, Jivatma, this and that and the other thing, knowing the definitions won't make you enlightened. Because, and allow me to come back to one of my favorite topics and one of the most important principles of Advaita Vedanta, and it's this: Advaita Vedanta is not a collection of spiritual information. Vedanta is not a philosophy. Vedanta is not information. So knowing the definitions of all these words is information. And just to make the obvious joke, think about how much information you have attained over the years. In your brain is an incredible amount of information. So are you enlightened yet? And if you think that if you gain a little more information about Vedanta, that little bit more information will make you enlightened, that's silly. Here's the point. Vedanta is not a teaching like history or algebra or any other subject matter. In fact, that's the right way of putting it. Vedanta is not a subject matter. Generally, when we study something, the goal is to master the subject matter. How do you master a subject matter? You learn all the different bits and how they fit together. That's how you learn a subject matter. There are many details, but those details are related. So just learning all the details isn't enough. You have to learn the details and learn how they fit together. That is what it is to master a subject matter, whether that subject matter is computers, algebra, history, or whatever else. Vedanta, the study of Vedanta is utterly unlike mastering a subject matter. And the problem is many people approach Vedanta as a subject matter, and then they master that subject matter by learning all the details and how it fits apart, and then they're frustrated because they're still not enlightened. They know what Vedanta teaches, and they're still not enlightened. Not only are they not enlightened, now they're more frustrated because they've devoted all this time and effort to learning Vedanta, and they're no further ahead than they were before. Here's the point. Vedanta is not a subject matter to be mastered. Vedanta is a method of self-inquiry to be employed, to be practiced. So Vedanta is first of all, self-inquiry. Subject matters are out there. Self-inquiry is in here, inside. And then that inward-turned inquiry needs to be guided. And these teachings guide that process of self-inquiry. That's method. So Vedanta is a method of self-inquiry. Self-inquiry is what you do. The method is what comes from Vedanta. And that method is step by step by step by step. The very last step is that Atma is Brahman. That's the last step. It's not the first step. Suppose you jump to the last step. Suppose you're in the kitchen cooking from a recipe and you decide, there are 10 steps. You skip 1 through 9 and you do the 10th step. a method doesn't work like that. You have to go through each and every step. So Vedanta starts by speaking of Atma and Brahman separately. That's the method. And then step by step and step by step, you come to the last step, where the identity of Brahman and Atman is revealed. So the reason we have separate words like Brahman and Atman is because this isn't a subject matter. If it was a subject matter, we just say, choose one or the other, or turn it into one word, Brahmatma. You can make one word out of it, no problem, Brahmatma. But it won't work as a methodology any more than starting at the end of the recipe. So we have to go step by step. So we start off, interesting, we start off with duality, Brahman, Atma. But in the end, that duality gets resolved. Okay, that is an answer to Amit's question. This is a good place to conclude our satsang. Thank you for joining us. We'll end with a prayer. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet Asato Ma Satgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityor Ma Amritangamaya. Om Shanti 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 Om.